The desert air burned like embers against Marcus Tate's skin. He blinked against the sweat trickling down his forehead, tasting the metallic tang of blood mixed with the dry dust coating his mouth. The darkness of the Texan night wrapped around him like a suffocating shroud, but the headlights of a distant car sliced through the arid landscape like a knife. Hope or doom? He still didn't know. Not a subscriber yet? Join our community by clicking subscribe and turn on the notification bell to get an alert every time we post a new video. A thin trickle of blood ran down his temple, where the brutal strike of a baton had split his skin. The bitterness of violence still vibrated in his teeth, but his gaze remained steady on the officer standing in front of him. "You're digging your own grave, boy," growled Officer Victor Hensley, his southern drawl dripping with venom. He spat on the ground, leaving a dark stain in the dry sand, then cocked his gun with an icy click. Behind him, the other officer hesitated, his fingers trembling over the grip of his weapon. Hensley noticed and narrowed his eyes. "What's the matter, Rollins? Lose your nerve?" Marcus smiled, despite the throbbing pain in his ribs. "You have no idea who I am." The headlights in the distance were getting closer. Faster. Their glow blazed against the silent desert, a miracle or a death sentence, 12 hours earlier. The soft hum of the engine filled the interior of the silver sedan as Marcus Tate drove down a lonely highway, cutting through the shadows of the Texas desert. The last remnants of sunset streaked the sky with orange and purple hues, but darkness had already claimed the horizon. The temperature still hovered around 90 degrees despite the night's arrival, and the scenery around him was a forgotten painting of dry brush and cacti that seemed to reach out, ready to ensnare passing cars. He sighed deeply and adjusted the air conditioning. The cool blast hit his face, momentarily easing the sticky heat clinging to everything. His fingers rested firmly on the wheel, his posture impeccable as always. Years in the FBI had taught him that discipline was what kept him alive, both in the field and on the road. Soft jazz played on the radio, an old Coltrane track, the saxophones weeping in harmony with his exhaustion. This was supposed to be his first weekend off in 6 months. 2 whole days to finally breathe. Maybe fire up the grill in the backyard, throw some ribs on like he used to, crack open a cold beer and listen to the chirping crickets while Jamal ran around the yard. A faint smile tugged at his lips at the thought. 20 years, 2 decades in the FBI, climbing from rookie cop in Atlanta to head of the Houston office. A black man who had faced down senators, crime lords, and corrupt politicians without ever backing down. He knew he had enemies. It was inevitable when you cut the strings of too many puppets. But tonight, all he wanted was to get home. The highway remained empty. The last car he had seen passed over 15 minutes ago, an old pickup truck stacked with hay bales. The only signs of life were the vultures gliding overhead, still riding the day's lingering heat. And then he saw it. A flicker of red and blue in the rearview mirror. Marcus felt his chest tighten. No siren, no warning, just that pulsing light, a gut punch all on its own. His eyes swept over the dashboard, nothing out of place, speed exact, gas tank nearly full, no warning lights on, his jaw clenched. "Not again," he muttered. He knew what was coming. He knew because it had happened before. 5 times in the past year. How many more over the course of his life? No badge, no title, no credentials could shield him from the gaze of a cop who had already decided he was a problem just for being there. He flicked on his turn signal, guiding the car toward the shoulder. The crunch of gravel beneath the tires sounded louder than usual. The engine gave one last purr before he shut it off. Slowly, he adjusted his navy blue tie against his crisp white shirt, an automatic gesture. His wrist brushed against the FBI, badge in the inner pocket of his jacket, cold, familiar, but not comforting. Click subscribe and turn on notifications. That's the only way to stay updated on our upcoming videos and never miss a thing. Because Marcus knew that, on this desolate road, Dignity and evidence were all he had. And too often, even that wasn't enough. Silence blanketed the highway like a stifling fog. Marcus watched in the rearview mirror as the patrol car rolled to a stop a few feet behind him. His breathing was controlled, measured, but his chest tightened with that same feeling that had followed him too many times in his life. The police car door creaked open, and a man stepped out slowly, as if savoring every step on the hot asphalt. The flashing patrol lights illuminated his figure, tall, wiry, clad in a short-sleeved blue shirt that revealed skin weathered by the unforgiving Texas sun. A silver police badge gleamed on his chest. Victor Hensley. Marcus didn't need more than a second to know exactly what kind of man he was. He had seen too many like him in his career, men who didn't respect the law but wielded it like a whip to lash those who didn't fit into their world. The officer didn't bother with protocol. He didn't tap on the window or use a flashlight to check the car's interior as procedure dictated. Instead, he stood with his legs apart, inches from the driver's side door, one hand resting on his holster, the other hanging loosely, as if he had all the time in the world. "License and registration, boy." The word landed like a slap. Marcus kept his expression unreadable. The choice of that word wasn't accidental. He had heard it before. He knew exactly what it meant. He took a slow, deep breath. "May I ask why you pulled me over, officer?" Marcus's tone was measured, professional, devoid of defiance. But that didn't sit well with Hensley. His expression twisted into a sneer, as if the question itself was an insult. "You didn't hear me, boy. License and registration. Now." Marcus clenched his jaw, but kept his composure. He moved his hand toward the glove compartment slowly, making sure every motion was deliberate and visible. Every muscle in his body was tense. He knew how easy it was for men like this to turn a simple gesture into an excuse to shoot. He pulled out his wallet, slid his license between his fingers, then leaned slightly to open the glove compartment. Inside, his FBI badge gleamed under the dim dashboard light. He grabbed it along with the car's registration and held them both out through the window. "I'm a federal agent. My badge is right here." Hensley didn't look at it. He didn't even glance at the credentials. Instead, his hand moved in a quick, sharp motion, snatching the license from Marcus's grasp. Then he let it drop. The small plastic card slipped through the open window and landed in the gravel with a soft crack. Something inside Marcus coiled tight, like a spring about to snap. "FBI, huh?" Hensley let out a dry chuckle, spitting a wad of tobacco onto the ground. "Sure, and I'm the damn governor." Behind him, the patrol car door opened again. Marcus saw the second officer step out, his movements less certain. Pete Rollins, younger, stockier, his uniform still too crisp to have spent many years on the street. Rollins walked up with an uneasy expression, as if some part of him knew this wasn't right. But he didn't say a word. He wasn't going to question Hensley. The air around Marcus crystallized with tension, sharp as a knife. "I'm stepping out of the vehicle." "Slowly," he announced, making sure his tone remained firm but not confrontational. But before he could move, Hensley slammed his fist against the car door. The sound echoed through the night like a gunshot. "Get out of the car!" he barked. And before Marcus could react, the door was yanked open with brute force, dragging him along with it. His shoulder slammed into the metal frame, knocking the air from his lungs. Hensley shoved him forward, forcing him to stumble onto the hot asphalt. "You gonna tell me you work for the White House too, Agent?" Hensley sneered. Marcus raised his hands calmly. This wasn't his first time dealing with something like this. He knew how this game was played, but then came the first hit, fast, dirty. Hensley's elbow crashed into his jaw with the precision of a man who had done this many times before. Marcus staggered, pain flaring in his skull. He didn't react. He couldn't. They were waiting for that, another blow. This time a knee to the ribs. Marcus doubled over, feeling the burn of his skin scraping against the rough pavement. Well, Looks like the feds aren't so tough after all, Hensley mocked, casually twirling his baton in one hand. Behind him, Rollins remained still, watching, not stopping it. Marcus spat a thin line of blood onto the ground. He lifted his head, locking eyes with Hensley. He said nothing, but Hensley saw something there, something that made his sneer falter for just a second. Because Marcus Tate wasn't broken, and the worst thing a man like Hensley could encounter wasn't an enemy who begged. It was a man who, even with blood on his face and bruises forming on his ribs, knew something he didn't. Because down the highway, a pair of headlights flicked on in the darkness. And it wasn't just any car. Help had arrived. The sound of tires crunching over gravel was the only thing breaking the thick silence of the desert. The approaching headlights cast a stark white glow over the scene, contrasting against the pulsing red and blue from Hensley's patrol car. Marcus felt a spark of hope flicker in his chest, but Hensley just smiled, a slow smile devoid of surprise. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look concerned. He had been expecting this. Marcus felt a cold sweat creep down his spine. This wasn't just a traffic stop. This was something planned. Well, looks like you've got company, boy," Hensley said, spitting another stream of tobacco onto the ground, his eyes never leaving Marcus. The approaching car came to a stop a few feet away. Its headlights dimmed, and a silhouette stepped out, backlit by the engine's glow. He was a broad-shouldered man, his bulletproof vest straining against his thick torso. His hand rested on the grip of his holstered gun like it was an extension of his body. Marcus knew his name before he even spoke. Pete Rollins straightened up, squaring his shoulders in a way that made it clear he recognized the man. Sergeant Voss. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. He knew who Ed Voss was, a county police sergeant, a man with too many connections. The kind of officer who made evidence disappear, who buried reports, who could twist any story into the version that suited him best. Marcus had come across men like him before. He knew Voss was dirty, but he didn't know he was involved in this. Voss walked forward, his leather boots gleaming under the dim desert glow. He gave Marcus a slow once-over, his brows furrowed like he was assessing a piece of merchandise before deciding if it was worth anything. "So this is the big FBI man," Hensley chuckled. "Not much to look at, huh?" Marcus took a deep breath, fighting against the sharp ache in his ribs. "If you think this is going to go unnoticed, you're dead wrong." Voss tilted his head, pretending to consider his words. "Oh yeah? That what you think, Agent Tate?" His eyes gleamed with amusement, then he gave a slight motion with his hand. Hensley moved before Marcus could react. The baton strike was swift and precise, slamming into his stomach with brutal force. Marcus doubled over, fire erupting in his abdomen. Blood filled his mouth as he coughed. He couldn't fall. He couldn't give them that satisfaction. But then came the second blow, and this time everything went black. The growl of an engine dragged him back to consciousness. His head throbbed with a dull, pounding pain, a relentless drumbeat threatening to split his skull apart. The red glow of a police car's interior lights flickered over worn leather seats. Marcus was in the back of a patrol car. The metal cuffs bit into his wrists with a tight, unforgiving grip. His white shirt, now soaked with sweat and blood, clung to his skin. He swallowed hard, trying to clear his mind. The police radio crackled. "Unit 12, we have the scene secured," Hensley's voice. Marcus squinted, forcing his vision to focus. The car was moving. Where were they taking him? He turned his head slowly and saw Hensley in the driver's seat. Rollins sat beside him, his elbow resting on the open window like this was just another routine night on the road. "Hope you're comfortable back there," Hensley said without turning around. "You're gonna be there for a long time." Marcus tried to move his wrists, but the cuffs were too tight. "Where are you taking me?" "Oh, don't worry," Hensley replied with a grin. "We're just making sure you get the justice you deserve." There was something in his tone, something that made Marcus's stomach drop. This wasn't a formal arrest. This wasn't a transfer to the station. They were taking him off the grid, erasing him. A surge of adrenaline cut through the pain and exhaustion. He couldn't sit still. He couldn't wait. If he didn't act now, he wouldn't get out of this alive. The patrol car rattled over the dirt road, each bump jarring Marcus's bruised ribs, sending sharp jolts of pain through his body. His eyes scanned the interior of the vehicle with trained precision, picking up every small detail. He was trapped in the back seat, hands cuffed behind his back, sticky sweat clinging to his neck, the metallic taste of blood still on his tongue. He took a deep breath. Think. Think. Through the front windshield, he could see the road stretching beyond the patrol car's headlights. The paved highway was gone. Now they were deep on a dirt path in the middle of nowhere. This wasn't a ride to the station. This was an execution. Rollins turned in the passenger seat and shot him a lazy grin. "You should be grateful, Tate. We're saving you a long trial." Marcus didn't respond. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him crack, but inside, his mind was racing. Hensley was too confident. He had made mistakes. First, they hadn't searched him properly. They didn't know he still had his earpiece, small, black, almost invisible in his right ear. Second, Hensley thought he was beaten. He wasn't expecting resistance. That was a mistake. Marcus flexed his wrists, feeling the metal of the cuffs bite into his skin. He moved his fingers carefully, testing the edges of the steel. There was a flaw. He had felt it earlier when they cuffed him in a rush. A small gap in the lock. A chance. The car slowed down. In the distance, the lights of civilization had completely vanished. Only shadows remained, and the sound of the wind whistling through the desert brush. Marcus inhaled slowly. It was now or never. The car came to an abrupt stop. Hensley killed the engine, and silence settled over the desert like a funeral shroud. "Get him out," he ordered, his voice ice-cold. Rollins stepped out first, circling the patrol car and opening the back door. Marcus watched him lean in, reaching to yank him out by the shirt, and then he moved, with the precision of a cornered predator. Marcus threw his weight forward, driving his shoulder into Rollins's face. The impact was brutal. Rollins grunted and stumbled backward, clutching his broken nose. Marcus hit the ground hard, landing on his knees in the dry dirt, gasping for breath. Hensley was already drawing his gun. Too late. With a sharp twist, Marcus jerked his wrists, forcing the loose cuff to slip just enough, freeing his right hand. At the exact moment, Hensley pulled the trigger. The gunshot ripped through the night, but Marcus had already rolled to the side. The bullet whizzed past his head, kicking up dust, adrenaline, instinct, survival. Blood pounded in Marcus's ears as he sprang to his feet in one fluid motion, his foot striking Hensley's wrist, sending the gun flying. The officer cursed and lunged for it, but Marcus was faster. The first punch landed square on Hensley's jaw, a hard, dry crack. The second dropped him to his knees. Rollins, still dazed, tried to get up, but Marcus was already holding the fallen gun, leveling it right at his face. "Don't!" he growled, his voice colder than steel. The cop froze, hands raised. Hensley spat blood into the sand, then looked up at him with a mocking grin. "What now, Tate? You gonna shoot me?" Marcus clenched his jaw. No, he wasn't going to give him an easy way out. The police radio crackled. "Unit 12, do you copy? We have a disturbance alert in your area. Repeat, do you copy?" Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Someone was listening. There was still a way out of this. Keeping his gun trained on Hensley, he grabbed the patrol car's radio and pressed the transmit button. "This is Unit 12. We've had an altercation, requesting backup." Silence. Then the voice on the other end. "Copy that, Unit 12. Sending units to your location." Marcus exhaled slowly. The game had changed. Hensley stared at him, fury burning in his eyes. He knew his time was up, but Marcus knew something else. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The desert wind howled, whipping up spirals of dust around Marcus as he stood firm next to the patrol car, the gun still steady in his grip. Rollins kept his hands raised, his lower lip trembling. Hensley, however, was breathing hard, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth, yet still wearing that same smug grin. He knew something, and in that moment, Marcus knew it too. Hensley wasn't afraid. Not for a single second. Marcus frowned and crouched down, grabbing him by the collar and forcing him to look him in the eye. "This isn't over," he growled. "Who do you work for?" Hensley grinned, his teeth stained red. "You think it's just me?" He coughed, spitting blood onto the dirt. "You think it all ends with me?" A chill ran down Marcus's spine. No, of course not. Hensley was too arrogant, too confident for someone who had just lost. That could only mean one thing. Someone else was backing him, someone with enough power that even the fall of a corrupt officer didn't matter. The patrol radio crackled again. "Unit 12, we're en route. ETA 5 minutes. 5 minutes too long." Marcus looked at Hensley, then at Rollins. The patrol car was still running, the engine idling. He could go. He could disappear into the night and find answers on his own. But there was a problem. Lena, Jamal. If Hensley was just a piece on a bigger board, then they were in danger, and he wasn't there to protect them. Panic tightened in his chest. He couldn't stay. He couldn't wait for backup. He had to move. Marcus climbed into the patrol car and slammed the door shut. "Don't you dare!" Rollins shouted, stepping forward. But Marcus was already hitting the gas. The tires screeched against the gravel as the patrol car swerved, then shot back onto the road, leaving Hensley and Rollins behind in a cloud of dust. The speedometer climbed fast, 60, 70, 80 miles per hour. Marcus checked the rearview mirror, his heart pounding. No one was following him. Not yet. He grabbed the radio and switched to the Houston FBI office frequency. The channel was silent. Then a faint buzz. "This is Houston HQ," a firm voice responded. "Identify yourself." Marcus took a deep breath. "Special Agent Marcus Tate. I need a secure line to the Deputy Director." There was a pause. Then the voice returned, this time laced with urgency. "Tate, we've been trying to reach you for hours. Your house was raided." A punch to the gut. "No, no, my family. They took Lena and Jamal." The car wobbled as Marcus gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Who?" "Houston PD. Warrant signed by Judge Voss." Marcus felt his world split in two. Judge Ed Voss, the same man who had shown up with Hensley, the same man who buried evidence, who protected dirty cops, the man who now had his family. Marcus closed his eyes for a second, steadying his breath. Hensley wasn't the problem. Voss was the real enemy. And now he had what mattered most. There was no time to waste. Want more content like this? Then hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because there's always something new here and you won't want to miss it. Marcus floored the gas. The patrol car's engine roared against the silent desert as Marcus sped forward, his mind racing. Lena and Jamal were in danger. Judge Voss had made his move. He wasn't just a corrupt judge, he was a man with power, a puppet master who controlled the local police and who knew how many more under his influence. But Marcus didn't have all the pieces, not yet. He clenched his teeth and punched in the direct line to the only person he could trust. Deputy Director Hayes. The channel clicked open. "Tate, God damn it, tell me you're alive." "I'm alive, but Hensley wasn't the big fish," Marcus growled, his jaw tight. "Voss has my family." A tense silence. Then Hayes's voice returned, more controlled now, but thick with restrained fury. "I'll move the whole damn department if I have to." "There's no time," Marcus cut in. "I need intel. What's Voss's connection to Hensley? Who else is behind this?" The radio fell silent for a moment. Then Hayes spoke again, his voice darker than before. "Tate, Voss isn't just a dirty judge. He's on Clyde Warren's payroll." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. That name, Clyde Warren. the mayor of El Paso, a man with a spotless public image, known for his crime-cleaning initiatives across the city. But Marcus had heard the rumors. There was nothing clean about Clyde Warren. He was the crime. The difference was his corruption was on such a high level that no one dared to touch him, until now. You're telling me this whole mess traces back to City Hall? It's more than that. Warren's been using the local police to clear his path. He controls judges, prosecutors, department heads. His influence reaches all the way to the governor's office. Marcus's grip on the wheel tightened. This wasn't just a case of dirty cops. It was an organized network, and now he was their target. "Where are they keeping Lena and Jamal?" he asked, his voice sharp as a blade. "We don't know yet, but Voss won't take them to an official station. Too much risk. He's probably keeping them at one of his private properties." Marcus clenched his jaw. There was only one way to find out. "I'm going after Warren," he said. Hayes's voice tensed. "Tate, if you go in alone, you won't make it out alive." Marcus glanced at the speedometer. 100 miles per hour. "Then you better bring backup," and he cut the line. The road stretched ahead of him like a dark ribbon, barely illuminated by the patrol car's headlights. Less than 30 miles to El Paso. Then he saw them, 3 vehicles lined up in the distance, blocking the road. 2 black SUVs with tinted windows, and in the center, a state police patrol car. Marcus slowed down, his mind assessing the situation in seconds. This wasn't a routine checkpoint, it was a trap. He gripped the wheel and eased on the brakes, allowing the patrol car to approach cautiously. The doors of the vehicles swung open, and several men stepped out, all wearing bulletproof vests and carrying rifles. These weren't regular officers. They were private operatives. Mercenaries. Voss was making sure he never made it into the city. A man with graying stubble and a scar across his cheek stepped forward, his pistol drawn, but still aimed at the ground. "Agent Tate." Marcus didn't respond. "We've been ordered to escort you," the man continued. "Voss wants to have a word with you." Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. If he got into that SUV, he wouldn't live to see another sunrise. He had to act. Now. His eyes flicked across the scene, measuring the distance between him and the armed men. 5 total. 3 with rifles, 2 with pistols. The SUVs were too close together. He could use them for cover. Marcus slowly let go of the wheel and raised his hands. "I don't want trouble," he said calmly. The man with the scar smirked. "That depends on you." Marcus nodded, and then he moved. In one swift motion, he drew his gun and fired. The first bullet tore through the leg of the scarred man, sending him crashing to the ground with a scream. The second shot hit another mercenary square in the chest before he could even lift his rifle. The others reacted too late. Marcus had already thrown himself behind the patrol car, using the frame as a shield as gunfire rained down on the asphalt. His only chance was to escape. He slid across the front seat and out the other side of the vehicle. The night exploded in sparks as bullets struck metal, shattering glass around him. He dove into the roadside ditch, rolling through dry brush and sand. A sharp pain shot through his side. He'd been hit. He didn't know how bad it was. He couldn't stop. The men shouted to each other, regrouping to flank him. Marcus struggled for breath. Then he saw his chance. A cargo truck barreled down the highway at full speed, oblivious to the chaos unfolding ahead. Marcus pushed his body to the limit, sprinting toward it and leaping just as it passed. His fingers caught the edge of the rear bumper, and his arms screamed in protest as his body lifted off the ground. The wind lashed against his face, the pain in his side burning with every breath, but he forced himself to hold on. The truck accelerated, pulling him away from the scene. Gunshots faded into the distance. Marcus exhaled sharply. He'd escaped. But Voss still had his family, and that meant this was far from over. The desert wind lashed at Marcus's face as he clung to the back of the speeding truck. His side burned with each breath, a searing reminder of the bullet that had grazed him. The truck tore down the highway, putting more distance between him and the ambush. But Marcus couldn't stay there. Gritting his teeth, he mustered the strength to pull himself up, climbing onto the cargo platform. His muscles screamed in protest, but he finally managed to drag himself over the edge. He collapsed onto the sun-warmed metal, gasping for air. He had escaped, but he hadn't won yet. Lena and Jamal were still in danger, and he wasn't stopping until he brought them back. The truck rumbled forward, the lights of El Paso beginning to glow on the horizon. Marcus reached for the small earpiece in his ear and pressed a button. "Hayes, tell me you've got something." The response came almost immediately. "Tate, listen to me. This is bigger than we thought. Warren is running a secret detention center on the outskirts of the city. Fake offices, fabricated arrest warrants, all under Judge Voss's protection." A cold knot formed in Marcus's stomach. My family? They're there. But they're not alone. There are others. Civilians, agents who didn't fit Warren's narrative, whistleblowers, people who just vanished from the system. Marcus shut his eyes. This was worse than he'd imagined. Warren didn't just control the police. He controlled the system itself. And now he had Lena and Jamal in his hands. Marcus pushed himself upright, staring at the city ahead. "Give me the location." A second of silence. Then Hayes responded, "I've got a man inside. He'll send you the coordinates." "But Tate, this won't be a simple infiltration. Warren knows you're coming." Marcus's lips curled into a cold smile. "Then let him wait." The truck finally slowed as it pulled into an industrial park on the city's outskirts. Marcus jumped off before it came to a full stop, hitting the ground with a hard thud that sent pain shooting through his body. He pressed against a concrete wall, struggling for breath. There was no time to rest. He drew the pistol he'd taken from Hensley. 12 rounds in the magazine. If he used them right, they'd be enough. The detention center was in an old warehouse a couple of kilometers away. A reinforced concrete structure surrounded by barbed wire fences, no visible signage. From the outside, it looked abandoned, but Marcus knew better. There were cameras, guards at the entrance, and somewhere inside, Lena and Jamal. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, visualizing the blueprint Hayes had sent him. 3 entry points. Armed security. He had to be fast. Moving through the industrial zone, he slipped between rusted structures and shipping containers, avoiding the sweeping beams of floodlights. When he was close enough, he pulled a small mirror from his pocket, angling it to check the main entrance. 2 guards, both armed. Marcus moved in silently, a predator stalking its prey. The first one went down without a sound as Marcus slammed the butt of his gun into the back of his neck. The second barely had time to turn before Marcus drove a fist into his throat, leaving him unconscious on the ground. He picked up the fallen guard's weapon and slid toward the side entrance. Somewhere inside that facility, his family was waiting, and he was getting them out, at any cost. Marcus slipped through the dark hallways of the clandestine detention center, his gun steady in his grip. Echoes of voices drifted in the distance, patrolling guards. There was no time for subtlety. He moved swiftly, staying in the shadows until he reached a steel door secured with an old padlock. From inside, he heard a muffled sound, a sob. His chest tightened. Lena. With a single shot, he blew off the lock and shoved the door open. Inside was a makeshift cell, lit by a single flickering bulb. Lena sat bound, her face pale but resolute. Beside her, Jamal stared at him, wide-eyed. "Marcus!" Hearing his name on his wife's lips sent a shudder through his entire body. He rushed to free them, slicing through their restraints with a knife he had taken from one of the downed guards. "We have to go." But before they could move, a voice stopped him. "I knew you'd come." Marcus turned slowly, gun raised. In the doorway, Clyde Warren leaned casually against the frame, a cigar between his lips, a smug smile on his face. You really thought it'd be that easy? Marcus didn't answer. He knew this wasn't over, not while Warren was alive. The mayor took a step forward, shaking his head in mock disappointment. Look at what you've become, Tate. A criminal. A fugitive. The news is already everywhere. The FBI wants your head. Marcus held his gaze, unshaken. Warren smirked. But you can still walk away from this. I can make it all disappear, give you back your career, your life. All you have to do. He exhaled a trail of smoke. Just give me one thing. His silence. Marcus understood at that moment. Warren wasn't offering a deal. He was flaunting his power, making it clear that even with a gun in his face, he was still in control. But Warren had made a mistake. He had underestimated Marcus Tate. Without hesitation, Marcus pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the cell, and Clyde Warren collapsed to the floor, his expression frozen in disbelief. For the first time in his life, he realized that his money, his influence, his corruption, none of it was going to save him. Marcus didn't look back. He grabbed Lena and Jamal, leading them out of the building as chaos erupted inside. The roar of helicopter rotors thundered above. The FBI had arrived. But Marcus knew this wasn't a happy ending. He knew what came next, and he accepted it. 12 hours later, Marcus Tate sat in an interrogation room at the Houston FBI office. His knuckles were still raw. His ribs ached. Lena and Jamal were safe. But he no longer had a life to return to. Across from him, Deputy Director Hayes studied him with an unreadable expression. You killed a man, Tate. Marcus leaned forward, exhaling slowly. I ended an empire of corruption. Hayes ran a hand over his face, exhausted. The media is split. Half of them see you as a hero, the other half as a murderer. Marcus let out a dry laugh. Welcome to America. Hayes studied him for a long moment. They're going to want a scapegoat. Marcus nodded. He knew. There was no escaping this, not after what he had done. What are my options? Hayes narrowed his eyes. We can make you disappear. No prison, no trial, but you'll have to leave everything behind. A life in the shadows. Marcus stared at his hands, then at the window overlooking the city he once called home. Lena and Jamal didn't know what came next, but he did. He closed his eyes, breathing in deeply. Then he looked at Hayes and nodded. Do it. If this story inspired you, leave a like to support the channel and subscribe for more content like this. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. And tell me where you're watching from. We love hearing from every corner of the world our channel reaches.